Gone. Federal, Victorian, Georgian, Italianate, Romanesque. Gone by neglect, by indifference, sometimes by simple failure to recognize the treasures around us. Gone. We know that much less about ourselves, our past, perhaps our future. We have that much less to pass on to our children, and they to theirs. An American writer raised a question. What, in fact, are we? Whatever else we may have been, we are surely now a nation in change. Pressure mounts, needs multiply, change accelerates. We are replacing faster than ever, building more than ever, gaining much, inevitably losing much, constantly reshaping and renewing our cities. What must we keep? What can we afford to let go? Each generation seeks to build freshly. It also needs to respect and preserve. Continuity, an unbroken line between yesterday and tomorrow. It is in what we have found on earth, and we preserve it. It is in what we have built on earth, and we should preserve it. All that we have been, we remain in part, and the buildings declare it. Structures and even whole areas that have served their purpose and graced their communities, and still do. Some linked with the history of a state or community, or with the names and events of the national American past. Some, the choice residues of an age, a place, a style, to hold on to aesthetic qualities, contrast, and continuity in the changing present. Others, the proud work of great architects and builders. Who needs the past, and why?
For the first time in my life, I have a sense of the physical presence of history, and I think this is truly what I would like for every single American to have.
It's where our roots began, I think. Mainly, I wanted my children to see it.
It gives one a very deep pride in one's country to see this.
I think that the most important part is that for people who come here to see where our nation started, and the most important part is to apply this to our lives today.
I think the way they're restoring them is really something, because so many places they just tear them down and let them go, you know. And but when you take, you know, a place like Philadelphia here, this is where everything should be restored. You know, it's right where we became free people. But the way they're restoring all the old townhouses around, I think that's amazing. I really do. I was looking at some of the pictures and they're, you know, how they let it go, and now they're bringing it back, and I think it's tremendous.
There have to be a few places where the population of the country can realize we actually have some roots.
There are more than enough good reasons to preserve older buildings. But which ones? Which areas? It makes no more sense to hold on to everything than it does to tear down everything. Judgments must be made. And when the judgment is yes, the ideal is to retain as much of the essential character of the building as possible, especially the exterior. To keep it authentic in color, materials, craftsmanship, details. It's easy enough to be inauthentic. Glittery pink was not the way it was in early San Francisco. Multicolored asphalt shingles will never properly take the place of wooden siding. A plastic canopy can be decidedly out of place. Then there are times when it's clearly not preservation at all, but fun and games. Call it psychedelic Victorian. But properly restored, the older building is a prize in the community and continues to serve it. Not necessarily as a museum, but active and alive, as a home, a business, a point of community contact. An old chocolate factory in San Francisco, for example, has been brought back to commercial life as Ghirardelli Square, delightful for people, profitable for business. The old lives with the new, and the generations join in partnership over time, finding answers to the question, how will we know it's us? And to the next question, what can be done and how? It must start with local initiative and the involvement of many forces in the community very early in the planning process. There are many avenues to preservation, many sources of advice and help. The National Trust for Historic Preservation, a nonprofit membership organization chartered by Congress, has long stimulated and assisted the work of private preservation groups throughout the country. Now there is a major commitment of the federal government to preservation. As one aspect of this, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, is an increasingly active partner with local governments and private groups in preservation efforts. We can now plan to preserve as we plan to renew, to beautify, to create open spaces, to provide small touches and amenities to grace our lives. But where and how do you begin? How much do we want to preserve, and why? A city can take a long look at itself as a whole, develop a master plan of renewal for the city as a whole. From the start, earmarking historic areas, groups of buildings, and specific structures for preservation amidst change. Within the master plan, narrowing further, renewal and preservation can be linked on a neighborhood scale. And they can remain linked all the way down to the specific urban renewal project. In one such project, a neighborhood, Worcester Square in New Haven, Connecticut, has lived through an experience in renewal and rehabilitation. It is hard now to visualize this as an area invaded by commercial blight, undermined by steady deterioration of once fine older buildings. The story is one of people restoring their own well-defined community by rehabilitating their houses and stores, with help from the local redevelopment agency.
When it came to spending the money, we found out that many of these people needed assistance. We provided a staff of architects and designers who would go ahead and give these people all the assistance they needed in making changes to their dwellings.
As part of the redevelopment plan for Worcester Square, the city first stimulated interest and local pride by building a new school and community center in the heart of the declining neighborhood. From that point, persuasion and guidance by the redevelopment agency, helpful printed materials financed by HUD, rehabilitation loans backed by federal government mortgage insurance. Mostly the people of the area did it for themselves. and it is mostly the same people who live in and enjoy a renewed and rehabilitated Worcester Square.
Was a fire trap, was a slum, was nothing, just nothing. Bigger difference, bigger difference. Can see the difference.
I tell you, you can't buy a house right here now in this section. Everybody's holding on to their property because they feel that it's the most popular street or this neighborhood, and kind of the school and everything else in it.
Spend a lot of money to rehabilitate those buildings. Today it looks wonderful. We're proud of it. Yeah, we're proud of it. And I pray God, few years that He's gonna give it to me. I want to die here on the Worcester Square. This is a straight talk. This is no politician talk. This is a straight from my own heart. And I see people cry. This is a truth. They want to come back here, but that's no place yet. In other words, those people, they move from Worcester Square. They're not happy. I'm a talk for the old people. They want to come back.
Across the continent, yet another story of people in an urban renewal area acting to preserve the character and identity of their neighborhood. In one old section of San Francisco, the Victorian houses of the 1880s and 90s needed help badly. Outside decay was fully matched within.
Well, most of the houses are run down inside and need repair. Usually the bathrooms and the kitchens are especially bad, usually. Well, I suppose it's livable if it wasn't for the fact that the house leaks when it rains.
The conditions are very, very depressing for human beings to bear. If it was possible to rehab it and have them move back, I think that would be ideal.
Yet hidden in many such rundown buildings were the potentials of loveliness and continued use. A program of preservation through rehabilitation is bringing out the potential and keeping the neighborhood and its population intact.
One of the interesting things about Victorian architecture is the fact that prior to this time, everything was handmade, and it was very expensive to build a house. And so details were very meager. But the minute machines were devised that would turn out wood and other materials very easily and cheaply, the generation went wild with it because they never had the chance to do what they wanted to. And as a result, you have an incredible proliferation of wood.
The determination of just what structures are designated for rehabilitation is a rather complex one and involves a series of steps. Initially, there was a windshield survey made of the area. This was done by driving through the area or walking through the area, observing the exterior condition of structures, observing the relationship of structures one to another, some idea of their physical condition. This was coupled with a walk-through inspection, which pinpointed, by way of a checklist, the obvious violations existing in the structure.
The heart of the program, local energy and will, plus help through federal loans and grants.
Rehabilitation is seen as a very desirable goal in the Western Addition because, one, it gives us the best opportunity to achieve rents which owners in the area can afford. Secondly, rehabilitation is seen as a complement to the structures which will be built in the area, a method of retaining some of the character of the old Western Addition area, helping to maintain a sense of community, some of the institutions here, some of the structures, and some of the old San Francisco.
Continuity and change. It is a partnership that benefits not only the residential areas of cities, but commercial sections as well. Case in point, Monterey, California. How do you plan to revitalize an old seaport town? Help it to turn its face once more back to the sea, which shaped its early character. And how do you do this while protecting the remaining adobe buildings which go back to California's Spanish and Mexican heritage of the early 1800s? Further complication. Where do you put a new highway that is a necessary and essential part of the renewal concept? The Monterey solution. Sensible accommodation of the car to the city with the cooperation, of course, of the highway planners. The highway will go underground, beneath the historic area, in effect, bypassing it.
By tying the sea with the land once again, we make the area a more human form and more human scale. The streets will be narrowed down into pedestrian malls, and the underpass will, of course, take care of the cars who want to get through. Our historic preservation effort is a wider definition than what some of the people may think is appropriate. We are preserving some of the turn-of-the-century moderns, which are an expression of that period, and we are rehabilitating these buildings to useful and functional purposes, and they will be restored for commercial uses. Our new buildings will not be copies of historic buildings, because they will not serve the purpose of the commercial uses that they will have to be put, but rather contemporary buildings that are sympathetic and harmonious with the existing buildings, the adobes, the Victorian buildings, and the turn-of-the-century buildings. Thus, we are, as I say, reweaving the pattern of the city rather than doing it by patchwork. And of course, the state of California is participating with us in developing the plaza and the park right in front of the major historic buildings in that area. The purpose of this park, of course, is to enhance these buildings, to put them in a setting that can be appreciated by the pedestrian, not by zipping through at 30 miles an hour, but by being able to experience the architecture.
In Monterey, there was no question as to what buildings deserved further life. But it isn't always a clear and simple matter to decide what's worth saving. How do we learn what to preserve? To gain insights that will help us keep what should be kept without repeating the errors of earlier projects. Providence, Rhode Island sought and found some clues in a classic study of its historic College Hill district.
Our strongest period is what we have called federal in character. It dates from about 1780 to about 1830.
Through an urban renewal demonstration grant, the Providence Preservation Society, a private group, and the City Plan Commission made a pioneering study of preservation methods, techniques of evaluating historic buildings, ways of tying historic areas into redevelopment plans.
When we first began, we had row after row of these houses that were covered with artificial siding, and as a matter of fact, this one looks in very good shape compared to some of the ones that we began with. But we have been able to rip off the artificial siding. We found very often that the original clapboards were there. The house that you're looking at now was built in 1792. Here the detail is ionic and has a simple pediment. Probably this doorway is like the house like the one that is no longer on the house that we have just been looking at. It's very typical of the doorways in Providence that were being put up from about 1785 to 1800.
The College Hill demonstration study was no abstract exercise. It became real as the Providence Preservation Society spurred the private restoration of many College Hill houses. With so much accomplished, the Society is now the sponsor of another phase of restoration in the nearby waterfront area, this time with urban renewal assistance. Contemporary buildings are planned to complement the old structures.
The Providence Preservation Society has also been interested in saving commercial architecture. Industrial cities like the New England mill towns have a wide variety of very handsome mill type buildings. There is one group on South Water Street, from South Water Street to South Main, that people in Providence have been eyeing for a long time. We had hoped that some wonderful thing would happen and we could keep them.
Wonderful? Perhaps. Exciting and realistic? Surely. There are many ways for communities, large and small, to keep alive their distinctive characters even as they change. Welcome to Galena, Illinois. A century ago, an important Mississippi River port, prosperous home for 15,000 people. Today, 4,500.
Since World War II, there's been this great and growing interest in Galena as an historic town, a unique town in the Mississippi Valley, a town that presents this almost complete story of 19th century architecture. Of course, the problem now is how to save the architecture, how to economically make this a living town, and at the same time, as a resident here, how to make this a nice place to live. It's a pleasant thing to walk down Main Street in Galena and realize these buildings have been here for 100 years. This makes the town solid. It gives the people roots.
How can Galena revive itself? Can its historic and architectural assets be turned to advantage? Educated guesses say yes, but it has to be tested. This is now being done through a feasibility study, locally administered, federally financed. A chance to find out where Galena is going.
To do this, we have set up several questions that we're trying to answer as part of the feasibility survey. And the first would be, can the buildings actually be restored? Are they physically strong enough to withstand all of this? All of these questions, however, hinge on the fact that we must find out what economically sound uses can be made of the buildings, the interior spaces, especially the ones that are now unoccupied.
There is no simple answer, but the people of Galena know their city has a chance to restore and find itself.
People that have traveled all over the United States and are so fascinated with this town that they think there's nothing like it. People come back to the store year after year, come back to Galena. They always say we're coming back.
Well, I'm sure something has to be done. Otherwise, it'll decay. It's in the process of decaying right now. I know that something has to be done, but as I said, I've never given any thought to what should be done or how it's going to be done.
In Galena and elsewhere, something can be done. Through HUD programs, including the new preservation grants, through the help of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, through many other channels, federal, state, private. And private resources in the long run will continue to carry a major share of the burden. To preserve or to destroy, this decision is up to the individual community. The community must make the choice and follow through with help if it seeks it. Preservation and renewal. A way of looking back and going forward at the same time. To create an environment we can live in with pleasure. And pass on to our children with pride. Our cities are changing, and we with them. But how will we know it's us without our past?